Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's video we are going to be going over how to install our plug-and-play BAC4000 kit for the Sur-Ron X. Let's get into it.
In the image you see now is everything that comes in the E-Moto Bros kit. The BAC4000 comes pre-installed with our tune specifically designed for the Sur-Ron X. In addition to the controller, you get all of the needed hardware, all the needed harnesses, and two CNC laser cut and laser bent aluminum brackets that fit perfectly for this setup.
When dealing with electronics, it's important to make sure that power is disconnected, so we're going to start with taking the battery out. Turn off the circuit breaker, disconnect your cables, take the battery out. Next step is to remove these two bolts here so we can get into the harness area. It requires a 4mm Allen. Once you're in here, start pulling out some of your wiring because we're going to need to find the two cables that come from your display and your horn. You can decide if you want to keep the horn and selectors, although these selectors won't be useful. However, we would recommend getting rid of this display as it will not output any information. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to locate your two cables here coming from both the display and horn, or just the display if you want to get rid of that. And you want to locate the two connectors, and then these are simple push connectors, so you just push the lever and pull them apart. For Cole, he wants both the display and horn removed, so we're going to disconnect both harnesses. If you're keeping the horn and only removing the display, there's two small Phillips head screws on the underside of the display, here, and unscrewing those will allow you to just take the display away from the horn and switch assembly. If you're removing the entire assembly, there's two Phillips head screws here on the underside. One here and one here. All we need to do is unscrew these all the way and it will release the clamp holding this to the bars. Now that we've removed the aftermarket display and horn, we're going to be installing the display that comes with our kit. This is the ASI V2 and can mount directly to your Sur-Ron handlebars. Since the cable comes out of the back of the ASI, you can mount it on either side. We're going to mount it on the non-throttle side. Insert the 3mm Allen back in and tighten it down. Once you get it to start feeding in, then we can go around to the other side to get the angle where you like it. To get the desired angle and position of the display, tighten the 3mm Allen fully on the back side. Now would be a good time to feed your display connector through the triple trees and into the harness area at the front of the frame. Next, remove the two 3mm screws at the top of this plastic guard here. Next, remove the two 4mm Allen headed bolts at the top of the controller. Be really careful because these can strip very easily.
So this one was stripped out, and we found a Torx bit that was able to get a bite on there, so we went ahead and did that. The stock bolts on these are really soft, so make sure you have a good bite before you start cranking on it.
Next, remove the two 4mm bolts on either side of the controller. On the stock setup, there's two small Phillips headed screws down here holding a little plastic piece. We removed it to make the bash guard fit better, but if you didn't remove it, that will also be there. On the back of the stock controller, there's 5 terminal lugs. 3 of them are for your motor phase wires, and 2 of them are for the power to the controller. We need to remove all 5 of them to get the controller off. Next step is to remove these two 5mm Allen headed bolts on either side of the frame. They hold in this plate on the back side, and removing them will give you easier access to the harnesses that you need to unplug. So this plate here, once you get both of the bolts removed, should push backwards like this, and that will give you access to all the harnesses up inside here, which you will need to remove the old controller and plug in the new one. Once this plate slides forward, your harnesses should drop down. There's 3 harnesses that connect from the stock controller to the main harness. All 3 need to be unplugged from the stock controller, and then the stock controller can be completely removed from the bike. If you have the Sur-On X, you might be able to put your used controller up on the market for a decent price to help cover a majority of the cost of the controller from us. You can sometimes get $300 to up to $400 for this, depending on how new it is, as a new one off Luna's website is selling for close to $500. Since the BAC4000 runs their terminal lugs up the controller instead of across the controller like the stock one, we're going to need to extend the stock motor phase wires. You should have 3 different lengths of cable included in your kit: a 7-inch cable, a 6-inch cable, and a 5-inch cable. What you're going to need to do is, since green, which is the green from the stock controller, that'll match with U, the yellow will go to V, and the blue will go to W. Since green is the farthest away, since it's going to be sitting upright like this, we need to put the 7-inch with the green wire, the 6-inch with the yellow wire, and the 5-inch with the blue wire. Starting with the 7-inch wire extension, we're going to run one of the 4mm M6 bolts through both the extension and this terminal from the motor, and then screw on one of the M6 nuts onto the backside of this bolt. We will do this for all 3 phase wires and then tighten them down. Again, the 6-inch will go to the yellow and the 5-inch will go to the blue. Using a 10mm socket or 10mm wrench, hold the nut on the bottom side while you tighten the 4mm Allen from the battery bay through that plate that we loosened earlier. It helps if you skew the wire off to the side a bit, so as it gets tight, the wire will slide around, and you want them to be aligned so that they're perfectly straight with each other. And make sure to get these fairly tight as well. Just go along the line. We'll do this to all of them. All 3 of these motor phase wires need to have no contact with each other, metal to metal. You can do this using heat shrink, although this bolt sticks out an amount that would make it hard to use heat shrink. So what we're going to do is just use a really good job using electrical tape to cover all of these open terminals up, and we'll show you what that looks like when we're done. This is what the connections look like all taped up. Remember, it's more important that these are a good tape job that won't come undone, because you cannot have these shorting together, than it is if they look good, because they're going to be tucked back into here into hiding and you won't be able to see them anyway. It's very important that these leads do not show, and the reason we didn't go with a different design like a bridge is that a terminal to terminal, lug to lug direct connection can transfer amps more efficiently and more of them. So this was the route we felt safe going with. Now, taking the harness that came with the kit, look at the side that has the plastic connectors separating some of the pins on the inside of the harnesses, as well as the display Bafang connector. This stock harness, this connector and this bigger one here, should plug directly in to the harness that comes in the kit. This lone connector that was connected to the stock controller is no longer in use. Then we will need to feed the display connector up into that area and plug it in up here to the one that we fished down earlier. So unlike the two connectors that plugged in down there, those connectors down there, you cannot mess up the direction of, they only go in one way. This has some fragile pins in it, but there is an arrow on both sides. All you need to do is make sure that those arrows are lined up and connect the plug. Now these 5 bolts at the top of the controller lug will need to be removed so that we can start connecting things. Make sure that you keep track of the lock washer as well as the normal washer. Now we can take the harness, and these can also not be mixed up, but you want the clip here to face downward. Bigger harness will obviously connect to the bigger plug, smaller one to the smaller plug. And then this green wire here, it's very important that this wire goes onto the negative ring. However, we want to put the negative wire coming from the circuit breaker down first so that there's more contact area on that large copper lug. So this is where it starts to get a little clustered. It can help to feed these harnesses back up into here a bit, give you some more room. But these should come in from the left side like this, and we'll gather up our hardware here. It goes bolt, then lock washer, then washer, then your connector here, and the connector needs to come in from the opposite direction that your wire from the circuit breaker comes, so it'll come from the top here. So feed the hardware through the negative lug. Bring it up here. This is a little bit challenging to do, but this will go in this way, and then we'll start it back up when we get this negative lug connected. We've now connected all the motor phase leads and both the positive and negative, as well as the ground for the harness. Again, make sure that these are all tight and that your blue is going to W, the yellow wire is going to V, and the green wire is going to U. You want all these wires to come straight out like this, and then we're going to twist it sideways, and if possible, actually we'll go in here and we'll undo this harness again. If you can feed this, the blue wire to the in between these harnesses, it fits a little bit better like that. So when you go to twist it, everything just fits a little nicer. Also, the two harnesses, the plugs, you'll need to bend them forward a little bit. Don't be too aggressive with it because you don't want to break any wires in there. But basically, you want to start tucking things back up towards the harness area in the front of the frame. So once you have all your cables situated, this is where we're going to install the 2 brackets to the stock controller and then to the bike. In your kit, these brackets will come powder coated. These were just prototypes so we could get this video out to you. So you can start a couple different ways, but you are going to want to get the bottom bracket on first. So as you can see, these holes in the side of this bracket are offset. You are going to want to put these around here, and more bracket should be sticking out the front, so this hole should be towards the back of the bike that way. Then you're going to use 2 of the Allen-headed M6 bolts with 2 of the nuts. This is important. This bolt needs to be going from the inside out so that it sits flush, and then on the back side here is where the nut will go. We're going to do this to both sides, and then we're going to need to tighten these down, but it's important that they're not so tight that it won't rotate. You still need it to be able to rotate so you can get the angle of your controller right, but you don't want to get it, so loose that this can move around. There are 3 machine screws here along the top of the controller, and all of 3 of these will be replaced top and bottom with these 6 screws here that are a little bit longer so that they can fit through the bracket and then go through this and down into the thread. So we need to take all 3 of these out before we mount them to the brackets. Once you have all 6 screws out from the top and bottom of the controller, we will now mount the top bracket to the controller. Make sure that the bend is facing towards the back of the bike and align the 3 holes at the top of the bracket and slide these machine screws that we've included in the kit down in. It is very important to note that the threads on the controller are pretty soft, so that if you cross thread these, that can lead to issues. So make sure before you run those things down that you've got them perfectly straight. Before bolting the controller to the brackets, this plate here needs to be pushed back forward. So you need to make sure that all of your cables are pushed in back here, and then as well as from the underside. And you'll get down from the side and look, and there's 2 clips on either side, one on either side, and the bolt needs to thread into those clips. So look through there and thread the bolt into that clip. If it's kind of hard to push this back into place, you need to look inside here and make sure that all of your harnesses are as pushed in as they can get, or else you're going to have a hard time mounting the controller and you're going to have a hard time pushing this back in. So with the top bracket mounted and the bottom screws taken out and then this plate bolted back in, make sure all of your cables are out of the way, and you're going to slide this under the horn, which can be removed, by the way, if you're getting rid of the horn assembly. And inside these slots, you're looking for those 2 M6 holes that we took those bolts out of. If you remember, one of those 2 was stripped on ours. So these, for now, can just go in hand tight. It's really just to hold things while we do the bottom. So now on the underside of the controller, we need to make sure that this bracket is parallel with this blue plastic cover. So if it's not, you're likely out forward and your controller's like this, out past the front a little too far. Make sure that that controller is pushed back and that this bracket, like I said, you want to leave a little bit of play in it, not to where it's loose, but just so you can rotate it. Get those 2 things parallel. And then on the underside here, make sure that all 3 holes are lined up and just get them in there hand tight, because we're going to need to move this forward on the stand to fully reach these with the screwdriver. The controller is bolted in. We need to come back to the harness area and start cleaning this up. So we'll start pushing all these cables back in here how they originally were. And we need to, so for the display cable here, you want to make sure that your connector is just right here, just barely on the outside. So if something does go wrong with the display, or you break it and need to replace it, this can just be put, or you can just unplug it here instead of having to take all this apart. But you want to slide this in bottom side first, make some room on either side for the key relay on the back side of this to all be pushed in, and we'll be back with you when we have this all pushed back together. Now that we have all these wires tucked in, we're going to replace these 2 4mm bolts. The top here, make sure that all your wires are being fed through this organizer. Bring some straight out the top before you fully cinch these 4mm bolts down. Now that all the hard work is done, we're ready to reinstall our battery. Now we'll turn on the bike for the first time. It's very important that your bike is up on a stand, because in some instances you can have a throttle malfunction or a throttle that is out of the standard range. And what this will do is cause the back tire to spin. So make sure that it is up before you turn everything on. So we'll turn the key on. And nothing on this controller works unless this display is on. And you have to turn this display on manually each time. There's a red button on top here. We'll just click that and everything will turn on. So depending on when this is shipped, you may need to update your firmware. We will try to keep the description of this video updated so that you know what the latest version is, but you can turn it on and see what version you are on in the boot up screen. However, I know that I need to update this as this is not the latest version. So there's a couple apps you're going to need to download. The first one is the ASI app. This is what you will use to control the display and change all your parameters. The second one is NRF Connect. That is the app that you have to use to update your display. So to get your display into bootloader mode, you're going to want to hold down the power and up button at the same time. So refresh it. So you'll see ASI BL, that means bootloader. Connect, scroll all the way over again, and this is where you will pick your update. I don't know how it works on an Android, but on an iPhone, you go to open documents. These are, I have two different updates for this. You'll probably only have one. You'll select the update, it's a zip file, click start, and it'll upload this. And we'll be back with you when this finishes. Once the display here finishes updating, you will see that the display will actually turn on, and it'll go and show you, speed, power, and assist level. So we can close out of this and open the ASI app, and you'll see ASI V2 here. So you'll have an activation thing. You want to click activate now, and then where you bought this display from, this will be Accelerated Systems Incorporated. Order number, you can just put 1234. Put your email, and then the bike's name. Click activate. And then you can just click, are you sure about the shop? Yes, I'm sure. It'll activate. Unless you don't have internet connection. Okay, so it's asking, or it's saying that it's putting it into a trial mode until it gets accepted. Okay, so this, I hadn't seen this before as I didn't do this on the last controller, but this should be fine as long as you're using it on this phone. So the bike will show up here. First thing you want to do is click these three bars over here, and when you click the three at the top left, you'll have power levels, ASI settings, and then display settings. We first want to set up our display settings. We're going to change this to Imperial since we're in the United States. All this in here you can go through and change from preferred units down to mode, button press. All of this stuff is really customizable. We're going to turn this to Eco Sport to keep the stock naming convention. Assist levels, we can run through that later what that means. Max speed, road is eco mode, so we're just going to set this to 100 kilometers an hour on both of them. Wheel size, Sur-On 19 inch. And this number down here, wheel circumference, depending on what sprocket you have, you can fine tune this number. The best thing to do is while you're looking at your display, you are going to want to have a GPS speedometer app open, set your max speed, and then hold the throttle just wide open. You're going to want to set it low to like 10 miles an hour so that you know you're only going 10 miles an hour. And then if your display readout, it will say 10 because that's what you set it to. But if your GPS app is reading something different, adjust your wheel circumference up or down to get that in the correct range. Then we're going to go down here to battery voltage. Set this to just to 72. It's not a 72 volt, but your battery zero voltage is somewhere around 52 and your upper range is somewhere around 67.2. Again, those numbers can be fine-tuned, but if you're on the stock surround battery, 32 amp hour. And once you change this, you need to click right down here. And after you click right, you're going to cycle the display off and then on. The display will not save your settings if you do not cycle it off and then on again. So now we disconnected. Since we turned it off, we'll go back to the search. Click on this, continue trial. And then get back to the display settings. As you can see, saved everything we put in. We're now going to go over to the ASI settings. And this is where you're going to have your power, your phase amps, your regen, throttle speeds, current limits, all these good stuff. So go in here and you can change these. The one thing I would say is field weakening. You can turn this higher as you get higher amperage. So in a 72 volt battery, you may have higher amps. Or if you have a high discharge 60 volt, or you've bypassed your 60 volt. I'm gonna have zero field weakening at the lower power level, but I'm gonna change this to 10%. Current limit stays at 100. PAS is pedal assist system. We don't have that, so that you can ignore. Throttle max speed, again, 100 on both these. Regen, you can set up. Phase current, this controller can go up to 450, I believe. People have ran their motors at that and it's been fine. We're just going to leave it at 400 for now. And we're going to turn this to 4800. If you're on the stock battery without the BMS bypass, you cannot set this number above 4800. If you do have the bypass, you cannot set that above 7000. So it's very important to get those right. We are now going to click right. And again, cycle the power to save things. You'll lose connection here. But now we are in eco mode here. I'm going to switch that by clicking the mode. We're going to switch that to sport mode. And you can see we have power. If you come over here and look at the display, you have an up and down arrow on your display, as well as the M. We've gone over this in other videos. I'm going to show you a little more right now. So M switches you between sport and eco. So eco mode was only 1000 watts. So I'm going to turn this throttle here. That's because we are in assist mode 1. They call it assist mode because this is generally used on e-bikes where you have pedals. We're still going to call it an assist even though it's technically your power level. If we turn this up to 9 here, you can go from 0 to 9. 0 is not going to have any power. But if we turn this to 9 here, and I go to turn this throttle now, you see that we have full power. So that's the display. And I am going to bring up the Egg Rider app again. I'm going to connect, continue the trial. And then, so those power levels that I was talking about is over here where it says power levels in the app. And it looks a little confusing at first, and that's because it is. But under each road and off-road, which is eco and sport, you have your power percentage. So full power is whatever you set this number here to. So for example, we have 1000 watts there. We go into the power level. If you're on power level 1 in eco mode on the display, you're going to have 20% power of 1000 watts. So you're going to have 200 watts. And over here, wherever your max speed is, throttle max speed 100, we're going to go over here to power levels, 20%. So your speed is limited to 20 kilometers per hour. And same goes for off-road. If you're changing these, if you open your app, you need to read in the settings every time. So if, for example, if I go over to ASI settings, you can see, say, oh, wait, I changed this to 4800. It shouldn't be 1000. You need to click read. That'll read in every setting that you've saved. And now when you go in, same with display settings, these are all going to be changed too, unless you read them in. Read it every time. And then if you ever change anything, it's absolutely crucial that you cycle the power off and then on the display. You'll lose connection here, but that'll save all of the settings on this display.
We hope you enjoy your E-Moto Bros controller kit. Now, if you thought this video was helpful, please consider hitting the like button, as it helps us out a lot. Also, if you would like to see more content similar to this in the future, please consider subscribing to our channel. Thank you and have a nice day.